There needs to be a concerted effort to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. And that requires a very clear agenda for retraining police officers, looking at ways to end racial profiling,
Hillary Clinton,
finding more ways to really bring the disparities that stalk our country into high relief.
That's at the Democratic debate the other night in South Carolina. An expert on racial profiling joining us right now on the phone. It's Dr. Alex del Carmen from Texas joining us right now. Doctor, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
And it's Tarleton University, which is part of the Texas A&M system. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And how long have you been there, sir?
I have been at Tarleton for 2.5 years.
And you are the executive director of the Criminal Justice and School of Criminology there. Is that a big program there at Tarleton?
It is a significantly large program, yes, sir.
Yes, and obviously this is becoming more and more popular with the young kids these days. We've seen it here in our area as well with a spike in the interest in this type of study.
It is. I think racial profiling and criminology at large are now have become the paradigms of many educational programs throughout the United States.
And, Doctor, you've gone a bit further with your own efforts here and consulting business that you use to help assist police agencies, government institutions, community leaders, and law enforcement agencies work through a number of these topics, correct?
I have, yeah. For the past 12 years, I've trained every chief of police in the state of Texas on racial profiling. They're mandated by the state to undergo a 40-hour training, and I am their first instructor out of 4 instructors that they receive instruction from throughout the week, and my area of focus is racial profiling. So, like many other states throughout the United States, Texas requires for police chiefs to not only undergo training, but also have the components of racial profiling within their structure.
Yes, it's something that's very sensitive here in this area as well, the relationship between police officers and sometimes a predominantly black community in the inner cities. We're having quite an increase in stories involving white officers and black suspects. Do you think we're getting anywhere in solving this tender issue?
You know, I think it's come to the national forum, as you indicated. I'm not sure about solvability. I think this is an ongoing challenge for generations to come, and I don't see really any hope in sight that in the next few years we're going to have this issue resolved. It goes to the root of the social problem of racism throughout our country.
And it is. I think you make a good point in the question that Dave had asked, because it is popping up everywhere and being highlighted in something as a presidential debate. Hillary Clinton making some notion of it during her forum and her opportunity to speak the other night in Charleston.
And it had been an incident there that had captured the imagination
Right.
of that community in particular, Jay.
Yep.
Right. So I think politicians have gravitated towards the issue, for they know that particularly minority voters throughout the United States are really interested in knowing what the candidates are going to do in terms of racial profiling. But in reality, what we have to always go back to is to see what kind of record these candidates have one way or another, and whether or not in their capacity as previous public servants, whether or not they did something about the issue.
We're talking to Alex del Carmen, the doctor from Tarleton State University in Fort Worth, Texas, a school of criminology expert down there. And what specific advice do you bring to consultations on this topic?
Well, obviously, the first thing that we have to keep in mind is that racial profiling is not to be tolerated. For those individuals that argue that racial profiling is a necessity in the context of homeland security, I often advise that our largest enemies throughout the world, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, these particular groups are highly adaptable to any type of form of deterrence or prevention that our country would have in place. And what I mean by that is that if we begin to isolate certain groups, religious groups or ethnic groups, all they have to do is simply solicit the help of individuals that would be under the radar screen. And it's as easy as that. So I think that racial profiling as a tool for law enforcement is simply it's a fallacy for folks that actually argue that. I think there is a distinct difference between criminal profiling and racial profiling, which oftentimes people confuse.
And with that, I mean, sticking with that topic, you mentioned training, every police chief in the state of Texas. And I know going back to Hillary Clinton, and, she's saying this is a reality in regards to Lester Holt's comments in the Charleston situation, asking if this was fear, that this plays straight to the fears of young African-American men in their lives, and that their lives are cheap. And Lester Holt asked Ms. Clinton, and she said, sadly, that is the reality. And with that, is there a concern for systematic racism in our criminal justice system? Is that really live and true?
Well, I think that what we have seen throughout the ages is that the criminal justice system argues to be impartial and fair, but in some instances, obviously, it's not. And I think it goes beyond the context of race. I think when we look at socioeconomic status, for instance, it is a well-known fact among many of us criminologists that individuals that have money and undergo an accusation or a charge in the criminal justice system are more likely to see lesser penalties than folks that don't have money. Education, for instance, matters, and clearly, along with socioeconomics, so does race and ethnicity. Unquestionably, those are realities which, once again, I warn the listeners this morning that our system of justice is by far one of the best ones in the world, if not the best one around. Nevertheless, there are imperfections associated with it.
Is it possible to strike a balance between the dangers of racial profiling and what some are calling is a necessity for further safeguards in screening illegal immigrants?
I think that there is absolutely no use of racial profiling when it comes to protecting the homeland and criminal enforcement. I think the idea that we are going to rely on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religious affiliation, for that matter, I think all of those are fallacies. We know, once again, that the enemy that we have in the United States, one of the biggest and most powerful enemies throughout the world, ISIS, for instance, is highly adaptable to any circumstances that are in place, and therefore race is inconsequential to them. They will approach individuals that don't look like the mainstream American, that may in fact not be Christian-based, as easily as they will approach someone from any town in the United States that would be an enemy of the government. And so to rely on racial profiling as a tool is absolutely useless, and it will be counterproductive to our security.
And how has that changed in maybe your training or your awareness with maybe some of these police police agencies? I'm going to use the word a typical domestic racism to maybe more something as you're talking about, different groups coming in the country and dealing with them on this same type of level. How has that changed with the way?
I think it's an easy argument to make, considering the fact that 2/3 of the people living in this country today are offsprings of immigrants. And so the reality is for us is to keep in mind, to be grounded on the fact that our country originates largely and has benefited incredibly well from immigrants that have come from all over the world. And in addition to that, to a local municipality, racial profiling is no more of a tool than it is to a federal agent protecting their homeland. And what I mean by that is that it has yet to be proven that relying on someone's race exclusively is going to help a criminal investigator at your local jurisdiction solve the crime, faster or perhaps more effectively than someone not relying on race or ethnicity solely. And so the argument is, once again, that it proves absolutely zero value to a criminal investigator as it would to a federal agent relying exclusively on race or ethnicity. So I think that it has a very limited, if any at all, assistance to them. And at the end of the day, it's all about the Constitution of the United States. It's all about the protection that Constitution gives us all Americans, which is, if we, in fact, in the process of protecting it, lose our ways of doing business, then we might as well not have a Constitution at that point. So, let's be careful with not becoming like the folks that we actually try to fight on a daily basis to preserve our country.